Hello, everyone. This is Pro-Trans-Pacific Partnership. Our This presentation is prepared by MJ, Reese, Paul, Nathan, as well as myself, and we will be introducing first of all what the concept of Pro-Trans-Pacific Partnership is, and how it impacts the macro components as we discussed in the chapters through our course. So next up, this is the introduction that I'll go through. So TPP is basically Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and it's between 12 countries, which includes Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, Vietnam, and the US. It was created with an aim to create a free trade agreement between these countries. However, it never came into effect, and as in 2017, US withdrew from it, and it transformed into something known as CPTP, which is called Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. It is also known as TPP11, and Canada already actually has a free trade agreement between some of these 11 countries, which are like Chile, Mexico, and Peru. Uh, However, it gives access to the other rest of the 7 countries from this agreement, and creates. So the biggest benefit of this agreement is that creates a favorable position for Canada, as there is no U.S. competition, and this could result in less dependence on US instead of the other available partners. Uh, Secondly, it also, like, the biggest result for this was obviously the less reliance on US, and higher amount of trades, especially from countries like Japan, Vietnam, Australia, and New Zealand, which have never been seen before. Next up, was our first chapter, the economic problem. So the three basic economic problems which every economy faces are what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce, which includes and the biggest economic problem that like all the economies face, and it's everywhere in our life, is scarcity of resources, scarcity of time, and it could be in any sense. Even in our day-to-day life, we feel we have scarcity of resources. So with this agreement in place, it places Canada in a position where it allows Canada to utilize its resources where they are efficient, and increase the output, and where the resources are not any efficient, it gives Canada an advantage to import those goods and services from other markets. It makes both import and export easy for all the members of TPP11 members, and allows them to focus on what they specialize. Obviously, the results would be better output and better production on production possibility curve, as most of the resources produced, as most of the resources utilized will be specialized to produce those specific goods, and they will produce what they best produced, and they have the option to import and import the goods which the other countries are specialized in producing. And it will help Canada in potentially increasing its exports and making the imports cheaper, as now it has more available options, and as well as there are no tariffs. And it will bring more investment from abroad, which will move Canada closer to fuller employment. So circular flow of income and GDP. So obviously, as import or export increases, decreases anyways, and production increases, it's definitely going to impact our circular flow of income. It is estimated that it will increase Canadian GDP by more than 4%. It increased even more than what was expected in the presence of US. It is mostly due to increase in net exports, increase in investment, and Canadian businesses will also increase investment to produce more to export, which again increases the GDP of the economy, and creates a trade balance. And foreign companies, foreign companies will also take this as an opportunity and invest more in Canada, which will again produce more jobs and more investment opportunities, and thus generating more taxes and more income, and which will definitely push up the spending of the economy. So next up, we have unemployment rate.
Canada had an employment rate of 6.9 in 2015, 3 years after joining the agreement. The unemployment rate rose slightly to 7 in 2016, but over the next 3 years, the unemployment rate fell rapidly from 7 to 5.7. From the macro point of view, after joining TPP, Canada's employment rate has increased significantly. This increase is due to the TPP agreement's tariff exemptions for the participating countries. Many industries will benefit. First, auto parts production and assembly are one of the pillar industries in Canada. For all of 2015, Canada imported about 1.9 million vehicles, while it's exported 2.4 million assembled and finished vehicles. In 2014, before the auto clauses were implied, there were about 130,000 workers in the automotive assembly industry. In this context, after implementing and obtaining duty-free policies from major market countries, Canada's automotive assembly industry will have greater industrial advantages, thus increasing its export quantity and correspondingly increasing domestic employment. On the other hand, the tariff reduction will also benefit Canada's natural resources, such as forestry, livestock, and seafood. Yeah, next page. Now I'm going to share something about aggregate demand, supply, and inflation. We can analyze Canada's aggregate supply and demand from the aspects of inflation, interest rates, GDP, import and export, trade, and government expenditure. After Canada joined the TPP in 2012, its overnight interbank lending rates rose slowly from 0.5 to 1.7 before COVID-19 in 2020. The monthly inflation rates increased from 1 to 2.2 in December 2019, and GDP increased from 1,500 billion in 2016 to 1,700 billion before the outbreak of the COVID-19. Government spending has held steady around at 20% of GDP, and the trade deficit in 2018 and 2019 was lower than it's in 2016 and 2017. Although the data and indicators given in macros economics are not entirely constant, Canada total demand and supply have increased from the perspective of macro GDP. And the impact on aggregate expenditure, statistics show that from 2015 to 2019, Canada's total consumption rose by 13.3%, while its GDP increased by nearly 14%. This has created a surplus in the Canadian economy. This will help people save, encourage investment, and thus increase consumer confidence. According to Statistics Canada, the TPP agreement will save Canadian exports about 428 million a year in tariffs among the 7 new FTA partners, with most of the saving coming from Japan, Vietnam, and Australia. As a result of liberalization, Canadian exports to the new FTA countries will increase by 2.2 billion, while Reese will introduce us about fiscal policy.
Yeah, so first off, the TPP is projected to boost Canada's GDP by around 0.127% above baseline. And then They've projected also that the GDP gains will be around 4.3 billion in the long run by 2040, presumably. Also, the TPP just helps create jobs, as mentioned before. And then with that, unemployed people that are receiving these new jobs creates more spending in the economy, and that in turn boosts the GDP. Also, the TPPs provided Canadian exports with over 400 million in tariff savings yearly, like Nathan mentioned. And then if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about money and banking. So yeah, the TPP will translate into Canadian businesses having to invest more money back into the production of their goods to create more, so they can export this, so they can export their goods to these new countries. And then that will also bring in more money from foreign investors. And also, as mentioned before, interbank lending was on the rise from 2015 until the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And this could be from TPP. And then we have the money market and monetary policy. And yeah, TPP obviously will help boost Canada's GDP. And then since our GDP is high, because of TPP, this should help keep Canada's interest rates low. And then with low interest rates, we obviously get more loans and more spending because these people are getting lower interest loans. And then with more loans, we obviously can relate that to a higher GDP just based off of how TPP is helping our interest rates stay low.
So the biggest benefit that TPP can bring to Canada is the future boost to import and export trade from zero tariffs. For example, maple syrup from Quebec and Ontario. Canada is one of the world's largest exporter of maple syrup, and Japan is the second largest market for Canadian maple syrup and maple sugar products. Cascade brand toilet paper, TPP signatories will eliminate tariff on wood and wood products within 3 years. The remaining products are lobster, airplane, crude oil, aluminum, Angus beef, and berries, and alcohols. Next page, please. So the TPP indicates that it will enhance cooperation on macroeconomic and exchange rate policies, avoid competitive developed nation, and will not use its country exchange rate for competitive purpose, allowing real exchange rate to adjust the economic fundamentals, facilitate smooth macroeconomic adjustments, which helps Canada with long-term external imbalance and promotes strong and balanced global growth.
Yeah, thank you. Our team would like to suggest the 3 main recommendations with TPP. First, active and professional investigation into member markets. By TPP, it is possible to compete on an equal footing with companies in member countries. So Canada has to find products with price competitiveness through market research and promote active exports. Second, diversification on export goods. Various products with export competitiveness, such as Canadian resources, services, and manufacturing, should be discovered and developed. Lastly, developing strategies to expand new customers. Canada can access over 500 million new customers through TPP. and is a very important opportunity to target major Asian markets such as Japan, Vietnam, and Malaysia. So marketing strategies should be established to target them. Next page, please. So far, we have looked at the overall impact of various Canadian economics by TPP, including trade, exchange rate, unemployment, expenditures, fiscal policy, and monetary policy, along with the explanation of the TPP. And to maximize Canada's economic growth through the TPP, it is necessary to continuously discover and develop competitive products in addition to professional market research on the member countries. And at the same time, make efforts to secure new customers. And thank you for listening to our team's presentation about TPP. Thank you.